I think it's really important that as young founders, we don't sell this lie that, we're basically like, I've got, a studio apartment, I do all these things, I get Ubers everywhere. No, it's not like that. We work really hard to do it. And so I think it's important that people know that you're going to have to do 8 things at once to get it done. But if you believe in it, you can get it done.
Hi everyone, welcome to Designing Tomorrow, your guide to sustainable entrepreneurship. I am Amayo and I am joined by
Kanishka. Yay, finally I am speaking today with Amayo, and we have a very special guest today, an award-winning designer from Intotum brand, Hanan. Hanan, how are you? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Hanan. I'm the founder of Intotum, an adaptive clothing brand making functional and fashionable garments for the disabled community.
This is our 4th episode. I'm so happy we made it here. Guys, I hope you have watched the first 3 episodes. If not, you need to watch it, because even the previous brand was also adaptive clothing brand, and so is this. So, Amayo, do you want to start?
Yeah, Hanan, could you tell us a bit about the brand and why you started?
Absolutely. So the brand Intotum, only really came to be a brand kind of the last year, but before that I was focusing on adaptive clothing, and that's because I've got a personal connection to adaptive clothing because it was all based around my granddad. So I already was sewing, I learned to sew about 11, and I started sewing then. I was making clothing, and the only reason I started making clothing was because I couldn't find things that fit myself. So I already wanted to learn to sew because I didn't agree with what was in the shops. And then when I was about 16, my granddad, he had cancer for a 3rd time, and during this cancer treatment it was kind of a lot different to previous bouts of cancer that he'd had, because it really affected him, and he had to have stoma surgery. So he got a stoma and a urostomy bag, and this bag basically meant that it was affecting his clothing, because a stoma bag, it replaces your bladder, is what he had with the urostomy bag. And he had to have it placed quite high as well, which meant it was further causing irritation with trouser waistbands and things like this all the time. And unlike previous surgeries he'd had, and he's had quite a few, he's very resilient, he'd recovered quite quickly from those. He didn't from this, and because it was, I think, affecting him a lot more, because it was affecting what he wore, and therefore it was affecting where he wanted to go, because he didn't want to go out in tracksuit bottoms and things like that, because he's a very well dressed guy. He was always dressed really smart, and so I was like, well, there's a clear problem here and should be a clear solution. And that was the moment I realised that there was not a clear solution, and adaptive fashion really at that point didn't exist in any format. It was just only very basic options from the NHS. Since then, luckily, there are others doing adaptive clothing, as you've said, and it's great that we're building a community of adaptive designers, but that's really where I started. I was like, there's a problem, I'm going to fix it. And so from that moment onwards, I started looking into adaptive fashion and how I could bring that into all of the pieces I was doing whilst I was at university, until eventually I was like, I'm an adaptive designer.
That's interesting, because you had a reason to start adaptive clothing brand because you had a very personal story behind it. But we spoke to Shamaya last time. She didn't really have a personal story behind it. So building a community with a personal story, how is it different? How did you build a community around this?
I think a lot of the time with adaptive design, it is something that's affected you. So it's a familial connection, personal connection. It might be even just you have a friend with a disability, or you start to look around and realise there's quite a lot of people with disabilities that aren't being catered for. And so I definitely think it helps having that personal connection for me, because, first of all, if I need, a tester, I can just call up my granddad and say, can you try this on for me? And he's absolutely happy to do it. But also it meant that I had a kind of passion for it more than I think some other people might do, because adaptive fashion, it's not a genre of clothing, for instance. It's really a need. And so I think if you're going into adaptive fashion, it should be because you want to make a difference. And that's really what I want to do. And I think having that personal connection to it does fuel why I kind of put so much work and time into it.
You're actually UAL alumni at this point. So just tell us a bit about your student journey and trying to form this brand, being in university, and how your studies informed how you built the brand.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of a up and down journey. I think being in university is always hard, and then also deciding you want to start a brand alongside is not a simple task. But really, I started doing adaptive fashion from kind of the very beginning. The very first project that I had ownership over, immediately I was like, okay, I'm going to bring adaptive fashion into this. And so the very first pieces of adaptive fashion I made were very abstract. They were kind of very in line with what you expect from fashion school. They weren't focusing on that kind of comfortable element, really. I was taking function and comfort, but it was not something people would really wear. It was more in line with runway. And I think that's what you kind of learn at fashion school. A lot of the stuff is clothing that's meant to go down a runway. And so I really just didn't agree with that, and I didn't agree with that lining up with adaptive fashion. I think there's a massive space for high fashion and adaptive fashion coming together, but that's just not what I wanted to do, and it's not how I envisaged Intotum being. So it was when I started to change the mentality of being, this is kind of functional clothing, it's meant to be worn. And that's where I kind of had some pushback sometimes, because, you know, at fashion school they want you to be really abstract, and they wanted adaptive fashion almost to be a theme sometimes. So I might be designing something crazy, but then I'll add some adaptive elements in at the end, but that just does not align at all with the ethos of my practice. And so I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And I was like, I'm going to do it this way, and you either going to let me do it, or we're just going to have to disagree, basically, a lot of the time. And you know, people did come on board, and I had real support, especially in my final year from my tutors, once they saw that I was really very serious about this and I was going to do it either way. And they've been really supportive of it then. But it was definitely a battle at some points, showing that adaptive fashion is a different methodology rather than it's, you know, a theme that you can add in.
Talking about challenges and achievements, you have won the Mayor's Entrepreneur Challenge. We have the Mayor's Entrepreneurs Challenge coming up.
Yep.
Do you have any suggestions on how to do a great pitch?
Yeah, I've done quite a few now, to be fair. So I'd say it's knowing what your brand means, if anything. You know, you can be a product or a service, it doesn't matter. But if you want to try and fix something or help people, and you can show that, and you can show that passion, that's what people buy into. You know, I could be making, like, I don't, but I could be making rubbish clothing. But if I'm really showing that there's a heart there, people, that's what they buy into. A lot of the time they're buying into the founder and the vision more than the actual product. And so I think that's what it's really important to show in your pitch is your genuine passion and why you've chosen to create something, you know?
So would you say that making your personal identity as part of brand identity worked for you as branding?
Absolutely. I think that's what people want as well at the moment. I think we've kind of moved away from the corporate culture of a standalone brand that nobody really knows what's going on. People love to see behind the scenes. They love to know who's founding it, why they're doing what they're doing. And so from the get-go, you know, you're the person that's come up with the idea. It would only make sense that you align with the brand. And even if it's, you know, a community you don't identify as part of, but you still feel you can have a positive impact, then other people will, you know, be along for the ride with that as well. You don't have to be creating a product for the disabled community, but, you know, have to be disabled yourself. People want you to make a positive impact, and that's people in the community, business partners, things like that. They want to see real positive change, so they're always going to kind of jump on the bandwagon with you, and if it's going to help other people.
Are you a solo founder at the moment?
Yes, I am.
I was going to ask about that because we're talking to Shemaya, and she has sort of just taken on a co-founder.
Yeah.
So how do you find it doing this and pitching and getting funding and being and managing your workload?
I think you've got to accept that you're not going to sleep, basically. But I accepted that probably first year of fashion school. So, you know, I kind of got used to it. But it's a lot to juggle, I won't lie. And, you know, I've worked a lot of different jobs alongside as well. You know, I think people think being a founder is all glitz and glamour, and you know, I do fashion week and I have my own studio and all these fun things, and they're great, and I'm really proud of things like that. But you know, still there's plenty of like odd jobs I've done along the way, worked in retail, things like this, to be able to do what I do. And all these business competitions that I've entered and some that I've won are the only reason I'm able to do what I want to do, is by getting that kind of funding. But I do enjoy being a solo founder because I don't like to compromise. I'll be honest with you. I don't like to compromise on, you know, what the brand means, what the impact I want to have. And I think that's, you know, a strong viewpoint to have in this business, is you should kind of go into it knowing that there's going to be people that come against you. But by being the only person, it means I'm not having infighting in the business. So then I'm going with one solid idea and kind of motion for the business, and then convincing other people to, you know, buy into it. But I do enjoy being a solo founder. You know, but I am recruiting as well at the moment, so I am bringing on another member of my team in a couple of weeks, so that's going to be really nice to have someone to share it with. But they're going to be an employee, not a co-founder.
Yeah, okay. Well, tell us a bit more about that decision to sort of grow your team, right? Because having a team behind you is really important as an entrepreneur. So what made you decide to bring someone else on?
I think it's honestly workload and finally having the capability to bring somebody else on. So the only reason I'm able to is because I won some grant funding. And rather than take the decision to pay myself, I have taken the decision instead to hire somebody else. And I think a lot of people would think that's mad. You know, if you're going to be bringing someone else, you should be paying yourself and you should have all this kind of set in motion. But that's just not the case in business. You know, I've got some great business mentors that I've spoke to that run very successful businesses now that have agreed, you know, they did the same things. Sometimes for 2 years, they weren't paying themselves at all. And, you know, I've been able to do that by working in retail alongside and then also working a full-time job in business. So I just work kind of 7 days a week in order to get it done. And it's only now I'm at a point where I'm going, okay, I can now go fully full-time on the business and I'm bringing on an employee. But I'm really excited because it means we get to do something new and there gets to be new ideas in the business as well. So that's what I'm looking forward to. But it's also always hard finding that right person. And I've been extremely lucky in that I was actually approached by this person and then it just kind of became the perfect match. But it, you know, it's always difficult trying to find, especially when you're doing a niche thing in design. There's not a lot of adaptive designers, otherwise, you know, I wouldn't be doing something new. So finding someone that has the same ethos as you has definitely been difficult, but they found me.
So I touched upon where you said that you're also doing part-time to fund your business. I really appreciate that insight from you, because so many people don't want to give that realistic POV of being a founder. You know, there is this pretty image in our mind. Oh, there's a founder, they're running a business. You need, if you don't successfully get a funding, you need to fund yourself somehow. Yeah. What is the struggle behind it? How do you manage your time? How do you keep up with like everything? Because we just have 24 hours.
Yeah.
What's the secret?
I'd say again, it's no sleep, to be honest. The secret is honestly my passion for it. I think my passion behind the whole business is really anger. It's anger at the industry, and that's what keeps me motivated. You know, I look around and I see no adaptive fashion and it makes me furious. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep pushing. And so that's the reason I work, to be honest, non-stop. And yeah, there's definitely a lot of people behind me, friends, family, saying you need to stop, you need to take a break and things like that. And I could be better at doing things like that, but I also just believe in the business so much that I'm not going to do it until I feel I've justified a break, which is, you know, I wouldn't recommend that mindset to anyone. Do take breaks, but that's the way I do it. And I think it's important to be realistic that yeah, I could pay myself if I wanted to from the business. I have won grant funding, and I could easily afford to kind of pay myself a wage if I wanted to, but I would have to sacrifice something else. I'd have to scale down the size of the launch I'm doing. I might have had to sacrifice doing our Fashion Week debut, things like this, because all of that costs money. Or I might have had to delay bringing on another member of the team. And I feel like those things, the Fashion Week, the size of the launch we're going for, and for bringing on an employee, are all going to have much bigger positive impacts than me getting paid a wage. And so that's just the route I've taken, really. And I know a lot of small business founders, and even Shamaya, she was working alongside doing all sorts of different jobs while she was setting up as well. And so I think, and she's always been vocal about that too, I think it's really important that as young founders, we don't sell this lie that, we're basically like, I've got, a studio apartment, I do all these things, I like get Ubers everywhere. No, it's not like that. Like we work really hard to do it. And so I think it's important that people know that you're going to have to do like 8 things at once to get it done. But if you believe in it, you can get it done.
So tell us a bit more about Fashion Week and also your big launch.
Can I add to that? I want to know about London Represent, how you reached out to them, what was the process like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been to London Represent shows before. I think they're a really important part of Fashion Week, and it's only, I think it was their, what are we in February, their September show, so last season was the first show where they're on the official schedule. And I went to that show just as a guest to watch, but I've also been backstage helping other designers at London Represent, so I kind of know the process. I'd met Samantha, one of the founders, a few times as well. And so when a lot of people were saying, I should have done September Fashion Week, but I only graduated in July. I was like, I don't really want to show the same graduate collection. And there were pieces, of course, that I've carried through from that into the new collection. But small changes that most people won't notice have been made that I notice. And so I needed the time to kind of create a full range and things like that. And I wanted to show something new and make sure it was a really considered collection. So that's why I went for February. And so basically, as soon as September's was done, I immediately reached out to London Represents and was like, I want to show, because I obviously saw Samantha at the show and we chatted about it and things, and they were absolutely, eager to see what kind of thing I wanted to do. And so it was really simple process of kind of just reaching out. Obviously helped that I knew quite a few people there, but the adaptive fashion scene is quite small, especially in London. Everybody kind of knows everybody. If you go to one event about inclusive fashion, that's everyone you're going to meet most of the time. So it helped, obviously, knowing those people. But they were really positive about it all and about having me in the show. And then it was just a case of, okay, once they said, oh, damn, now I need to get the whole collection ready, basically, by that point. And it was definitely a lot of work to get it done in time.
Yeah, so tell us a bit more about your launch.
Yeah, the launch. Well, it's, I mean, I don't think any brand's first launch goes super smooth. There's definitely a lot of things that go like wrong in the background. There's been fabric changes, manufacture changes, things like this. Like even simple things like pattern changes take longer than you want them to, because there's only so much you can do in one day. So, I might decide to forego some sleep, but I'll get some trouser pattern fixed. So it's a win-win sometimes. But then the launch is going well. We're basically building up to launch, hopefully start of June. We've had to push that back a bit, and that's something that people probably wouldn't say either, but I think it's fine. That's just how business goes. Originally, like probably 6 months ago, I was like, I'm going to launch in March. No, definitely not launching in March. So I think it's important to be realistic and to be fluid as well. Being a founder, like, it's fine that things go wrong and that I've had to move things about and rejig them, but also it's meant that it's given me more time. So now that I know I'm launching in June, we're planning a big photo shoot. We're planning to do an open casting as well, so we can get members from the disabled community that have never modelled before into the campaign, things like that, because we want to show it's clothing for real people. And you can be a model, you could have never modelled, you might want to be one, and these are all the people that we want to get involved in it. So we're going to be launching that open casting hopefully in a few weeks, and then building towards that. But we're also trying to plan, you know, a launch event and things like that. So quite a lot going on. When I say we, I mean, it's mostly me, but I do...
Soon to be two.
Soon to be two, and obviously we have been talking about things, so that's who I mean by we, but also there's like a silent team of people behind me, e.g. my friends and family, you know? Like, I think I call my mum and my sister at least once a day and say, I've just had a thought about this, or I was going to change the zip in this, what do you think? Yeah. And that's what bringing an employee on will be for me, having that second opinion, because I think especially if you've studied fashion and when you're working in like a workshop environment, you know how much you value having that person working next to you. You know, my friends that I got from my time here at UAL, it really was just me consistently turning to them saying, what do you think of this? Should I move this hem? Should I move this? And so that's what that second person's for, really.
It's sounding board.
Talking about like working individually and working with a team, so you've pitched solo for the longest time. I mean, since forever you don't have a person on board. So how is it like to plan the pitch solo, show conviction in your pitch, and just be out there in front of the audience, ready to take all the questions and have no one else to, you know, look to? Emil, can you ask, like, how do you go about that?
Yeah, I think I want to add on to that and say, you've won a few competitions, but you must have lost a few as well. And like, is there anything you've learned from that made you even more, I guess, confident?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that the very first competition I won was the Mayor's Entrepreneur competition, and I did not in any shape or form expect to win that competition. I went into it as kind of the only solo founder, I believe, that was, you know, a finalist. And I was up against teams from universities like UCL, Imperial, that have very intense, you know, business graduate programs. So they had, you know, intensely practiced their pitches and had coaching on it. And I'd had support from LCF, but I very much was like, I'm going to do it myself, to be honest. So I hadn't really reached out to anybody to get support on it. Okay. But I think I went into it just, I'm going to do the best I can possibly do. And when that one went well, I was like, oh, okay. All right, I am actually good at this. And that definitely then boosted my kind of confidence for the next ones. But I've always been a confident person, but not a confident speaker, actually. You know, I would have, you know, weekly crits on my degree, basically. And so these would be like once a week, once every 2 weeks. And it'd be about like, what do you think about this collection? And so I'd be showing my work and explaining, oh, I've done this. And I'd just be so nervous. I'd be nervous about, you know, negative opinions, even positive opinions was mostly, you know, people were quite nice in these things, but I just was so nervous to share my work. And so it was getting over that was what helped me do the pitching, because I think that's the big thing I've found that's a commonality between like founders or people who've got an innovative idea, is they don't want to share it because they're worried either someone's going to steal it, which I wasn't worried about, but it was more they're worried someone's going to steal it, or they're worried what if people think it's awful and things like that. And so I think I lacked the confidence in the business a little bit at first, because, you know, I was 20, 21, and I didn't know what I was doing really. Like, I've not got a business degree, so I thought people were just going to think I'm like a silly little girl talking about fashion. And I think the problem is because I have been in situations like that, where I have been in front of people that have kind of seen the business as a fad, is why I felt that way. But most people have not come across like that to me. They've been really supportive of the business, and so I needed to basically just get over those negative opinions of it. And I think that's where it kind of matches in again to this whole passion and anger that I've got. Once I realised that those people are basically stupid, was the moment I started to feel so much better about the business. And I turned that kind of fear into passion. And I was able to be a lot more confident in the way I pitch and the way I talk about my business. And I think the main thing that I've found is a lot of people are scared in the question time in any of these competitions. Everyone is always so nervous for that bit, and that's my favourite bit, honestly. Really? And I always say to people, well, they're only asking about your business and you're the founder. So if you can't answer that question, you probably shouldn't be the founder of the business.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. If you work on this business so much, you know it inside out. And even if it's not an answer that, you know, they want to hear, where sometimes they're asking, what's your projected figures for the next 3 years? Like, I don't know all of those off the top of my head. Like, you know, I can give you some accurate projections for the next year. And so be honest. And that's the thing I'll say. I'll say, we don't know where we're going to be in 3 years. Hopefully, you know, with your support, we're going to be like sky high, but I can tell you where we're going to be in a year. And so it's being able to twist that around and always show a positive about your business.
That's an interesting tip. Yeah, I love it. Can you let us know about what kind of resources helped you with your starting your business, or like funding or pitching?
Absolutely. I would say look out for any kind of business resources that you can find for free, first of all. So things like free business plan help, things like that. There's so many resources online, you know, even if it's through like TikTok or something, there's like so many things you can find just by searching like how to start a business. So I'd say definitely start by doing things like a business canvas or a vague business plan. So you've kind of figured out what your idea is, who it's supposed to serve, you're figuring out your customer, and then you can start to do market research or things like that to prove that your business idea is going to work before you then start to, you know, say this is a business. I think you need to figure out exactly what it is, and you'll refine the idea throughout the whole time you're working on the business anyway. Like, what I do now is still different to when I was like, this is the business. But when I very first was looking into kind of turning adaptive fashion into a fashion brand, I really didn't know what I was doing, and so it helped me a lot doing those kind of things. Like, even like UAL has quite a lot of those kind of things, like a business canvas and stuff, and they had a lot of free sessions that were really helpful. And I mean, if you look on Eventbrite, there is something new every single day for how to start a business or networking opportunities, women in business, things like that. And so go to all of them, because even if it's just a case of I want to do this, you know, meeting those people, and I could easily just approach and say, I run an adaptive fashion brand. Doesn't matter how big the scale of it is or what stage I'm at, I've got something to say and I've got people to meet then. So definitely network and look for anything free, and that network will help you build your kind of your circle, your community within business. And then also look for mentors. So, you know, mentors can be peers as well. It doesn't have to be people that are successful in business. It can be people that can just provide an opinion. But if you can find someone that's doing what you want to do, even if it's, you know, in a different kind of branch, but they're successful in it, reach out to them. And especially, you know, small business founders, they're way more likely to respond, and they want to help because they've been in the same place you've been in.
I would just like to ask on an ending note, where do you think your journey is taking you at? Where are you focusing? Because you've done London Fashion Week now, you're building up your team, but where do you think adaptive fashion is going? How do you want to grow more? How do you think, what you're going to do with the funding? What's the next action plan?
So next steps is obviously, first of all, actually launch. That would be great. But then from there, it's just scaling. So it's what's the next collection going to be? You know, there's so many branches we want to go into, things like occasion wear, sports wear. There's so many different things that can be done in adaptive fashion. And so that also comes, you know, collaborations and things come with that. So there's loads of different opportunities we'd like to kind of go into. But also it's about making sure we keep the community at the center of the brand always. So I'd really like to be able to kind of employ more people from the disabled community and have a real business base, have a kind of office space. That's what I'd really like to aim to have in the future, is a place that we are based, that is a kind of open office that we can then kind of work more with the community. And so everything we do, all the designs we make, they're all tested rigorously. So that's, you know, testing the fabric, washing it again and again and again, things like that, but also making sure that every prototype is worn by members of the community, shown to carers, shown to parents, shown to a range of people with disabilities, so that we're covering as many elements as we can. And so I want to keep that at the core of the brand always. And so as we grow, it will probably be by incorporating someone whose role it is to kind of cover that side of things, to ensure that we keep it at the center of the brand. That's what I really would like to do.
Amazing. How insightful today has been. Amazing.
So where can we find more information about what you're doing and keep up with Intotum?
Absolutely. So you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, X under Intotum Fashion. And we also have our website as well, www.intotumfashion.com. And so we've got our newsletter as well now. So sign up. You can sign up for pre-order at the moment as well, which is really exciting. And get involved. Always feel free to reach out, message me if you've got an idea for something you'd like to work with Intotum. We're always up for it.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being part of this.
Yeah, that's the end of the episode. You're listening to Designing Tomorrow. We are at LCF Designing Tomorrow on Instagram and YouTube. And we'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, stay tuned for the next episode. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Namaste.